British actor Anthony Head, known for his starring TV roles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Ted Lasso, has died aged 72.
A heartbreaking message has left fans stunned, and now people are wondering if there was far more to the story than anyone realized. Sarah Michelle Gellar's emotional tribute to Anthony Head has reignited memories, sparked speculation, and brought decades of hidden emotions rushing back into the spotlight. What did Sarah say that has fans fighting back tears? And could her powerful words reveal a bond that remained unbreakable long after the cameras stopped rolling? Join us as we uncover the touching tribute and the deep connection that shaped a generation of television.
His family confirming his death in a statement, saying he passed away due to complications from pneumonia, surrounded by his loved ones.
The news no Buffy fan was ready for. The news broke on a Friday, and it took over the internet in a matter of minutes. Anthony Head died at 72, and the announcement came as a massive shock. For everyone who grew up watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this did not feel like the typical passing of some random, distant celebrity. It felt like losing someone who had basically been a real part of the family for 7 full seasons. The news came from the people closest to him, which made it feel all the more real. His 2 daughters confirmed the death, explaining that their father had died from complications of pneumonia. Anthony was best known for playing Rupert Giles, the librarian and mentor who served as the only stable adult in a television show driven entirely by teenage chaos. He was part of the series from the very first episode. For millions of viewers, he was the calm presence who made all the fictional monsters actually watchable. Losing him felt exactly like losing the one grown-up who always figured out what to do. Fans immediately filled the internet with old video clips, favorite lines, and photos. Everyone kept bringing up the character's signature tweed jackets, his dry humor, and the quiet way he protected the teenagers when things went completely wrong. The sadness spread fast, hitting every single generation of viewers who used to spend their Tuesday nights watching the drama unfold in that weird fictional town called Sunnydale. There was something uniquely frustrating about losing him to a completely normal illness. On screen, Giles survived apocalypses, ancient demons, and the literal end of the world multiple times. The character seemed practically invincible, completely tied to a show that was all about beating impossible odds. Losing the actual actor to a real-world medical issue just served as a blunt reminder that television magic cannot actually save real people. Out of all the tributes that showed up online that day, one specific post got a lot more attention than the rest. It came from the actress who played the exact girl Giles spent 7 seasons protecting on television. Sarah Michelle Gellar was preparing to make a public statement about the death, and she picked her words very carefully. The tributes told the world how much he was loved. But to understand why, fans first had to remember the man who turned a librarian into a legend.
His daughters, Emily and Daisy Head, said it had been a privilege to see the impact his life had had on so many people.
The man who became Giles. Before he ever set foot in Sunnydale, Anthony Stewart Head was already a familiar face, at least to British audiences. He had built a steady career on stage and screen, and for a time he was best known across the United Kingdom as the charming star of a long-running series of coffee commercials that played out like a tiny romantic drama. People knew the face long before they knew the name. Then, in 1997, came the role that changed everything. A new American series about a teenage girl who hunts vampires needed an older actor to play her watcher, the wise guide who trains her and stands beside her. Anthony stepped into the part of Rupert Giles, the buttoned-up Englishman who ran the school library by day and helped save the world by night. He turned what could have been a stiff, forgettable mentor into one of the most beloved characters on television. Across the show's run from 1997 to 2003, Giles grew from a fussy librarian into the emotional anchor of the entire series. Anthony gave Giles everything. He gave him the dry wit and the disapproving glances, but also the tenderness, the courage, and the deep, unspoken love for the young people in his care. He even got to sing, revealing a warm musical side that surprised fans who only knew him as the serious one. Giles could be funny and fierce in the same breath, and that balance came entirely from the actor who played him. The best thing about his character was how easily he flipped between being completely annoyed and totally heroic. He could easily trash-talk a teenager for doing something stupid, and then literally risk his life for that same kid in the very next scene. That specific combination of constant frustration and absolute loyalty felt completely real to anyone who grew up with parents who showed love by constantly stressing out. Anthony clearly understood that a great mentor is basically a mix of a teacher, a babysitter, and a safety net, and he managed to do all three at the same time. He was a main cast member for the first 5 seasons and returned as a recurring presence for the final 2, but his shadow hung over every episode. The show simply did not feel right without him. He was the grown-up who believed in the kids when the world told them they were too young, too strange, or too small to matter. On screen, Giles was the father figure the show desperately needed. Off-screen, that bond turned out to be just as real, and it ran deeper than anyone watching could have guessed.
The British actor found international stardom in the 1990s fantasy show Buffy the Vampire Slayer as the wise librarian mentor Rupert Giles.
The father figure, on screen and off. The relationship between Buffy and Giles was the quiet engine of the whole series. She was the chosen one, burdened far too young with the weight of saving everyone. He was the man who carried that weight alongside her, teaching her, scolding her, and protecting her like a daughter. When the writing was at its best, their scenes felt less like a TV mentorship and more like the bond between a father and the child he would do anything for. That warmth was not just clever acting, and it did not switch off when the cameras stopped. Sarah Michelle Gellar has long spoken of Anthony as a true father figure, someone whose steadiness shaped her during the years she spent growing up in the public eye. She was just a young actress dealing with a massive amount of stress on set, and he was the experienced older actor who made the workplace feel stable. Over the course of 7 seasons, they built a strong level of trust by working side by side through long nights and difficult scenes. He constantly looked out for her, and she never forgot that support. Getting that kind of genuine care during the most intense years of a young career creates a bond that stays around long after the show gets canceled. That is exactly why the loss felt so personal. For Sarah, this was not just the death of some former co-worker she shared a screen credit with decades ago. It was the loss of a man who had been a regular part of her life since she was a teenager. So when the news broke, everyone online immediately waited for her specific post. People wanted to see exactly how the girl who played Buffy would say goodbye to the man who played Giles. When she finally made a statement, she did not hide behind a fake corporate PR message. She let everyone see exactly how much the situation hurt. She could have written anything to mark his passing. Instead, she chose a single line that fans would recognize in an instant, and it left them in pieces.
British actor Anthony Head, known for his starring TV roles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Ted Lasso, has died aged 72.
The heartbreaking message. Sarah posted her tribute on Instagram, sharing a bunch of old photos of herself with Anthony and the rest of the cast. She did not even start with her own words. Instead, she opened with a line that Buffy actually said about Giles on the show. It was a quote meant to let him know that she had finally sorted her life out and that she was doing completely fine. Because nothing says deep, authentic personal grief quite like digging through an old hard drive for 90s set photos and letting a fictional teenage superhero do the talking. It was a devastating choice because that line carries enormous weight for longtime fans. It comes from the 5th season finale, an episode that was written as a possible ending for the entire series, a moment built around sacrifice and farewell. By reaching for those exact words, Sarah wrapped her real grief inside the show's own language, and the effect was instant and overwhelming. Then she answered the line honestly, admitting that she had not figured it out at all and that she was not okay. In the same heartfelt post, she told him plainly that she still considered herself lucky, writing, "But I know I'm the lucky one because I knew you." It was a completely straightforward sentence that did not need any extra drama. There was no over-the-top display of sadness or fake emotion. The post just showed a regular person missing someone important, using the one specific connection the two of them always shared, which was the television show that brought them together in the first place. She closed by turning her attention to his family, thanking his daughters for sharing their father not only with her, but with the world. In a single line, she captured what so many fans felt, but could not express. Anthony had belonged to his daughters first, and yet, through his work, he had become a kind of guardian to millions of strangers who never met him. Part of what made the post land so hard was its restraint. There was no long essay, no list of achievements, no attempt to sum up a whole career. There was only a daughter of the show speaking to the man who had guided her through it in the private language they had shared for nearly 30 years. Sometimes the smallest words carry the most weight, and these did. The tribute spread quickly, and the reaction was a wave of collective heartbreak. People who had not thought about Sunnydale in years suddenly found themselves crying over a librarian. That is the strange power of the bond Anthony helped create, and it is why Sarah's goodbye struck so deep. Sarah spoke for a generation of fans that day, but she was far from the only one whose world had just grown a little darker.
British actor Anthony Head has died. His family says he passed away today from complications of pneumonia. He was 72.
A cast that became a family. Grief rarely travels alone, and within hours the rest of the Buffy cast began to share their own goodbyes. What came through in every message was the same simple truth. Anthony was not just respected on that set. He was loved, deeply and genuinely, by the people who spent years working beside him. James Marsters, who played the vampire Spike, wrote one of the most moving tributes of all. Remembering his friend and colleague, he described a hole left in the world and called Anthony a kind and steady presence, adding simply that he was the best of us. David Boreanaz, who played Buffy's first great love, Angel, shared a photograph of the two of them laughing together. He said that laughter and a warm smile were how he first met Anthony, and that it was exactly how he intended to remember him. He spoke of kindness and of a soul that had inspired him, and he thanked the man like a brother. Emma Caulfield, who played the former demon Anya, reached back to a perfect ordinary day in 2011. She had visited Anthony on a film set, and the two of them had lunch, wandered into a record store, ate dinner, and laughed until their sides ached. She had been lucky enough to call him a friend for 27 years, and that day was just one of many gifts he gave the people around him. It is easy to forget how young most of that cast actually was when the television show first started. They were forced to deal with sudden fame, constant pressure, and growing up right in front of millions of people. And Anthony was one of the only experienced actors on the set. He showed up, behaved professionally, and treated people well, which gave the younger actors a real example to follow for the rest of their careers. Decades later, the thankfulness in their public posts was not just random nostalgia. It was genuine respect from people who learned how to behave at work by watching him do it right. Read together, the tributes painted a portrait that went far beyond the screen. Here was a man who held a cast together, who showed up with patience and good humor through the long grind of making television, and who turned co-workers into lifelong friends. The Sunnydale family was fictional, but the family that formed behind the scenes was as real as any. To his castmates, he was a friend who made everything better. And beyond Buffy, his gift for winning people over reached audiences who had never heard the name Giles at all.
British actor Anthony Head has died, aged 72. He was best known for his role on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and most recently as Rupert Mannion.
More than the Watcher. As beloved as Giles was, Anthony Head was never a one-role actor. His career stretched across decades and genres, and he kept finding new audiences right up to the end. For many younger viewers, he was not the Sunnydale librarian at all, but a very different kind of character entirely. He played the noble King Uther Pendragon in the long-running fantasy series Merlin, bringing gravity to a show watched by families around the world. He appeared in the comedy juggernaut Little Britain, in the acclaimed film The Iron Lady, and in adaptations of beloved classics. More recently, he popped up in major hits like Bridgerton and the spy thriller Jack Ryan, proving he could move between tones with ease. To a whole new generation, he became Rupert Mannion, the smooth and scheming villain of the hit comedy Ted Lasso. His work on that series drew warm remembrances too, with co-star Brett Goldstein noting the strange magic of a deeply kind man playing such a thoroughly awful character. Goldstein put it beautifully. He pointed out that Anthony played one of the worst people imaginable and that it took an enormous gift to do it so well, precisely because the actor himself was one of the best people you could ever hope to meet. He described him as charming, kind, funny, and a joy to be around, which is exactly the reputation Anthony carried everywhere he went. There was also the music. Anthony was a singer and performer who loved to get on a stage, and that creative spark never left him. Whether he was playing a wise mentor, a cruel club owner, or a doomed king, he brought the same craft and the same generosity to the work. Audiences trusted him, even when he was playing someone they were supposed to hate. What tied all of these roles together was a sense of trust the audience placed in him without ever quite noticing. A lesser actor playing a scheming club owner or a cold king would have read as a cartoon, but Anthony always found the flicker of humanity underneath. Even his worst characters had a pulse, a reason, and a hidden softness, and that is why people kept inviting him back to play them. He made the bad guys worth watching. On screen, he could be a hero or a villain, and he made both feel completely human. Yet the role that mattered most to him was one no script ever wrote. The father, the friend, and the legacy he leaves. Long before the world ever saw him as Giles, and long after the television show ended, Anthony Head was just a dad. His two daughters, Emily and Daisy, both ended up becoming actors too, following him into the same industry. When Sarah Michelle Gellar publicly thanked them for sharing their father with the rest of the world, she was highlighting the actual reality behind all the public sadness. Anthony belonged to his family first, and everything the public adored about him was simply an extension of who he already was at home. Across the wave of tributes that followed his death, the same words kept appearing again and again, which were kind, steady, generous, and warm. That is a rare thing to leave behind. Plenty of actors are remembered for their talent, but far fewer are remembered first and foremost for their goodness. Anthony was, by every account, exactly the man his colleagues described. The kindness on screen was not an act. It was the real thing, shining through the characters he played. His legacy lives in the work, of course. Buffy will keep finding new fans, and somewhere a teenager discovering the show for the first time will meet Giles and feel instantly that here is an adult who can be trusted. That feeling is the gift Anthony gave, and it does not fade when an actor passes. It simply waits to be discovered all over again. But the deeper legacy lives in the people he touched. In Sarah, who called herself lucky just for knowing him. In a cast that became a family. In the strangers who learned, through a fictional librarian, that the right grown-up can make even the scariest world survivable. Anthony Head spent his life making people feel safe, and that is no small thing to leave behind. So why does the loss of one gentle, talented man feel so personal to so many? And what do you think about his legacy? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.